Have you ever thought you knew someone completely, only for everything to come crashing down in an instant? This is my story about how my life was flipped upside down, and it all started at the airport. My name is Graham Ellsworth, and I'm 34 years old. I'm a university researcher in Chicago, specializing in behavioral psychology. Now, my job isn't glamorous, but it's fulfilling. I make $85,000 a year, enough to live comfortably in a one-bedroom apartment near Northwestern University. It's not the most exciting life, but it was a good one. For the past 5 years, I'd been in a relationship with Lydia Harcourt. She was a 30-year-old marketing coordinator at a firm downtown, earning around $60,000. We had been engaged for almost 3 years, and our wedding was scheduled for September 2024. Everything seemed perfectly planned out. We had the perfect little routine. Weekends were spent looking for a new place to live together. Lydia still shared an apartment with 2 roommates in Lincoln Park, splitting a $2,400 rent 3 ways. My place near campus cost me $1,900 a month. It wasn't the biggest apartment, but the location was perfect for my work. The plan was simple. After the wedding, Lydia would move in with me. We'd start looking for something bigger, maybe even buy a house in a year or 2. We talked about kids, vacations, our future. Everything seemed like it was falling into place. But sometimes, life doesn't go according to plan. You see, in early June 2024, Lydia planned a 3-week trip to Europe with her college friends, Sarah, Jessica, and Amanda. She had taken trips with them before, and I was fine with it. Actually, I encouraged it. After all the wedding planning stress, I thought it would be a good way for her to unwind before we tied the knot. The night before her departure, everything felt perfectly normal. We had dinner at our favorite Italian restaurant on Rush Street, and Lydia seemed excited about the trip. She showed me the itinerary on her phone. Paris, Barcelona, Rome, Amsterdam, a full European tour. She was talking about the museums she wanted to visit and the restaurants Sarah had researched. She was full of energy and excitement. I didn't know that Lydia had already started distancing herself digitally. She had quietly adjusted privacy settings, changed passwords, and prepared for this moment. It wasn't until later that I realized she had been preparing her exit strategy while smiling and discussing travel plans with me. The next morning, I drove her to O'Hare International Airport. The terminal was packed with summer travelers, everyone rushing to catch flights. I found her friends at the check-in counter, and the 4 of them were buzzing with excitement. We stood in line together, Lydia and I holding hands, making small talk about travel plans, checking her passport, making sure she had everything she needed. It was the usual couple stuff, nothing unusual. But then, as we approached the security checkpoint, everything changed. Lydia stopped walking. Right there, in the middle of the terminal, surrounded by people rushing to catch their flights, she just stopped. I thought she was just distracted by the crowds. But when I looked at her, she wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the floor. "Graham," she said, her voice soft, almost distant. "I think we need to take a break." I must have misheard her. The airport was loud, announcements echoing off the high ceilings. "What did you say?" I asked, confused. She looked up at me, her face was serious. This wasn't spontaneous. It was like she had rehearsed this moment over and over in her mind. "I think we need some time apart," she said, her words hitting me like a brick. "I need to figure things out." At that moment, I thought I had misheard her. But no, she was serious. Her friends were already through the security line, waving for her to hurry up. Sarah was pointing at her watch, mouthing something about their boarding time. I asked her, "Figure what out?" "We're getting married in 3 months. What is there to figure out?" She shrugged, like it was no big deal. I just need some space. We'll talk when I get back. Space? We were 3 months away from getting married, and she needed space. I didn't understand. I didn't know what to say. I thought maybe it was a temporary feeling, maybe she was just nervous about the wedding, or maybe the stress of planning was getting to her. But that wasn't the case. And just like that, she was gone. She grabbed her carry-on bag, smiled at me one last time, and walked off toward the security line, disappearing into the crowd. I stood there, completely frozen. I felt like the world around me was moving, but I was stuck in place. I tried to call her that afternoon, but my calls went straight to voicemail. I sent her a text, asking if we could talk about what she meant by taking a break. But no response. I tried WhatsApp. The message was delivered but never read. Later that evening, I realized that she had blocked my number completely. Then, I checked social media. Blocked there too. Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, all gone. Within 24 hours, Lydia had erased me from her digital life while she was out traveling with her friends. It didn't make sense. We were supposed to be planning a life together. How could she just disappear like that? The first week was the hardest. Not because I was heartbroken, but because I couldn't wrap my mind around what had just happened. I had always prided myself on understanding human behavior, but Lydia's actions were completely out of character. I couldn't make sense of it. By the end of the first week, I knew what I had to do. I called the wedding venue. The Chicago History Museum, where we had booked the reception. Mrs. Patterson, the events coordinator, was kind and understanding. She said, "Mr. Ellsworth, this happens more often than you'd think." She offered to hold the deposit for 90 days in case we worked things out. But I knew I wouldn't need 90 days. "Please go ahead and cancel everything," I told her. "I'll forfeit the deposit." The cancellations started rolling in. The caterer, the photographer, the florist, the band. Each phone call felt like a punch to the gut, but it also felt strangely liberating. I was canceling everything, the wedding, the plans, the life I thought I had. By the end of the first week, I had lost almost $15,000 in deposits and non-refundable fees. But something interesting happened as I made each cancellation. I felt lighter, freer, like a weight was being lifted off my shoulders. But this wasn't the end. There was still so much more to come. The truth, the lies, the betrayal, everything was about to explode. Stick around, because this story has more twists than you can imagine. Don't miss out. Subscribe and stay tuned for next. The next few days felt like a blur. It was as if everything I knew had been stripped away. My life, my future, my engagement, all of it was suddenly in question. And Lydia was gone, halfway across the world, with no explanation. I tried calling her over and over, but she didn't pick up. I sent text messages, desperate to understand why she'd done this, why she was acting this way. No replies. Not even a hint of anything that could explain her sudden decision. Now, I want you to think for a second, what would you do if the person you were about to marry just up and disappeared without any warning? How would you react if they blocked you on everything and cut off all communication? I started to feel a sense of powerlessness that I had never experienced before. As the days passed, I tried to distract myself, throwing myself into work, reaching out to friends for support, but it felt like my world was crumbling. Then, things started to take a strange turn. By the end of the first week, I received some unexpected news from mutual friends. One of them, Jake Morrison, who worked with Lydia's roommate Amanda, mentioned that Lydia had posted a photo from Barcelona. She was surrounded by a group of people, including some guys they had met at their hostel. Jake didn't give me all the details, but it was clear from his tone that Lydia wasn't spending her time thinking about our relationship. She was enjoying herself, and she was doing it in a way that didn't involve me. As the days went on, the updates kept coming. Tyler, who was dating Sarah, told me about Lydia dancing in clubs in Rome. Beach pictures from the French Riviera started showing up on Instagram. In every single picture, Lydia was carefree, surrounded by strangers, laughing, dancing, living her best life. Meanwhile, I was back in Chicago, dealing with the mess she'd left behind. The wedding was off, the venue cancelled, the vendors were furious. And Lydia? She was living her best life, and I wasn't even part of the picture anymore. It didn't make sense. How could someone go from being completely engaged in a relationship, planning a wedding, to disappearing for weeks without any explanation? I wasn't sure what to think. Was I being unreasonable? Should I have just given her the space she asked for? But every time I thought about the way she'd cut me out of her life, blocked me, and disappeared without warning, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. By the end of the second week, I started hearing rumors through our mutual friends. I heard that Lydia had been talking about how liberating the trip had been. She was painting herself as the victim of a controlling fiancé, someone who had pushed her too hard and too fast into marriage. According to Lydia's version of events, I was the one who had been unreasonable, not respecting her need for space, and that's why she had to take a break in the first place. But then something happened that made my blood run cold. My friend David, who taught sociology at Northwestern, forwarded me something that his girlfriend Emma had seen. It was a screenshot from a private group chat between Lydia's friends. The messages, sent from Amsterdam, revealed the truth. Lydia had been telling her friends that she felt trapped by our relationship, that I was pressuring her, and that I was trying to control everything. But the most shocking part? Lydia had been partying, hooking up with guys in 3 different cities while I was back home, planning our wedding. She wasn't just taking a break. She was living it up, completely disregarding everything we had planned. I couldn't believe it. It felt like a punch in the gut. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I was about to marry, had completely lied about everything. She had turned me into the villain in her story, when the truth was, she had been the one checking out of the relationship long before that airport goodbye. I needed to do something about it. I needed to take control of this situation, to stop letting her control the narrative. So, I made my first decision. I started documenting everything. I screenshot her social media posts before she blocked me, saved all the receipts from wedding cancellations, and created a detailed timeline of events. I also started doing something that would make Lydia furious when she found out. I packed up her stuff. I spent an entire Saturday boxing up all of Lydia's things. Her clothes, her books, her toiletries, even the food in the fridge that I had been storing for her. It felt therapeutic, like I was taking back control of my life. I didn't throw anything away, though. I wanted her to have her things back, but I didn't want her to think that she could come back whenever she felt like it. She had made her decision, and now it was time for me to move on. When I was finished, I had 14 boxes stacked in my living room. I sent a message to Amanda, Lydia's roommate, and told her she could come pick up the boxes whenever she wanted. Amanda replied quickly, asking if I was sure this was necessary. "Graham, don't you think you're being a bit dramatic?" she texted. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. Lydia had already made it clear how little she cared about me, so why should I keep holding on to the things she left behind? The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. It was strange, not having Lydia's things around, not getting messages from her asking what I was doing or what we should plan next. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. I wasn't waiting for her call. I wasn't checking my phone every 5 minutes to see if she had finally reached out. It felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. But as it turns out, Lydia wasn't done. She was about to do something that would change everything again. Trust me, you're not going to want to miss what happened next. Make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell because you won't believe what Lydia did next. 3 days after I sent the boxes with Lydia's belongings, something unexpected happened. I was at work when my phone buzzed with a WhatsApp message. It was from an international number. I didn't recognize the country code, but I opened it anyway. "Graham, I've been trying to reach you," the message read. "We need to talk when I get back. I'm ready to work things out." I stared at the message for a long time. 6 weeks had passed, and now she was ready to talk. After everything that had happened, after the way she had blocked me and disappeared without a trace, I couldn't believe it. How could someone disappear for 6 weeks and then expect everything to go back to normal? I thought. She was still treating me like I was the one in the wrong, like I was the one who had messed up. I didn't even bother responding right away. I wasn't sitting around waiting for her permission to fix things, not after everything she had put me through. But her message gnawed at me. Maybe I should meet with her and hear what she had to say. Maybe there was some kind of misunderstanding, some way to move forward. I wasn't sure, but I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't going to jump back into the relationship without thinking it through. The next morning, I sat down and typed a message back: "There's nothing to work out. I've moved on." I sat there for a moment, watching the message send, feeling the weight of it. That was it. I was done. But her reply came almost immediately. "What do you mean you've moved on?" she asked. "I just needed time to think." "You had 6 weeks to think," I replied. "I used that time to think, too. The wedding is cancelled. Your things are with your roommate. We're done." Her response was immediate. "You're being ridiculous. We can reschedule the wedding." I realize now that I was just having pre-wedding jitters. It's completely normal. Pre-wedding jitters? Was she serious? After 6 weeks of no contact, no explanation, and no respect for me, she thought this was just about jitters? I turned off my phone and went to bed, my mind racing. Lydia had come back into my life, trying to rewrite the story. She thought that by offering an apology, by blaming her actions on jitters, she could just pick up where we left off. But that wasn't how it worked. I wasn't the same person anymore. The next few days were a blur. Lydia was back in Chicago, but I hadn't heard from her directly. I didn't care. I had already moved on, and there was no going back. But I knew she wouldn't give up that easily. I had a feeling that this wasn't the end. And I was right. On Tuesday afternoon, I got a call from Miguel, the doorman in my building. He told me that a woman had shown up at the lobby asking for me. She didn't have access anymore, and he wouldn't let her upstairs. "She says she's your fiancé, Mr. Ellsworth." Should I let her up? I didn't even have to think about it. "No, Miguel. We're not engaged anymore. If she needs something, she can contact me directly." Miguel seemed surprised, but I wasn't. I had made it clear. I had no intention of letting Lydia back into my life. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Lydia's number. I let it ring a few times before I picked up. "Graham, what the hell?" she said, her voice full of frustration. "Miguel wouldn't let me upstairs, and now I'm stuck in the lobby. This is ridiculous." I didn't even flinch. "I told you. We're not engaged anymore. I don't owe you anything." Her voice went higher, almost pleading. "You're ending a 5-year relationship over a misunderstanding? You're just going to throw all of that away?" I stayed calm. You ended it at the airport. You blocked me for 6 weeks. You didn't give me a chance to even talk about it. She fell silent for a moment, and I could hear her breathing heavily on the other end. Then, she started crying. Not the soft, quiet kind of cry, but the dramatic sobbing she used to do when she didn't get her way. It used to work on me. It used to make me feel guilty, like I was the one in the wrong. But not anymore. Graham, please, she said between sobs. Can we at least meet somewhere and talk about this? I realize I handled everything poorly, but I was just overwhelmed. The wedding planning, moving in together, all of it felt like too much. I needed space. Space. I had heard that word 100 times in the last month, and I was done with it. You needed space for 6 weeks while I cancelled our wedding? I asked, my voice steady but firm. That's not how it works. You don't disappear and leave someone hanging. I could hear her trying to regain control of herself, but it was too late. I wasn't buying her excuses anymore. I wasn't falling for the manipulation. I don't want to talk about this anymore, Lydia, I said. I'm done. Please don't contact me again. The next few days were quiet again. No more phone calls, no more texts, no more surprise visits. But Lydia wasn't finished. She was about to make one last attempt to turn everything around. She still had a key to my apartment, a key I had forgotten about when I had her electronic access removed. One Saturday morning, I came home from the gym to find her sitting on my couch, holding a handwritten letter. Miguel had called me earlier to let me know she was there. I wasn't sure what to expect, but seeing her sitting there, like nothing had changed, made my blood boil. She still thought she had some kind of claim over me, like she could waltz back into my life after everything she had done. Graham, she said, looking up at me. I wrote you a letter explaining everything. About why I needed space, about how much you mean to me. I know I messed up, but I think we can start fresh. I just stared at her, unable to believe what I was hearing. Lydia, you need to leave now, I said, my voice cold. Give me the key. She looked at me, confused. What? Graham, I don't understand. We can work through this. I know I was wrong. I just needed some time to figure things out. No, I said firmly. You're done. And so am I. I held out my hand for the key, and she reluctantly handed it to me. As she walked to the door, she turned around one last time. You know what, Graham, she said, her voice full of bitterness. Maybe this is for the best. Maybe I dodged a bullet. Any man who would humiliate his fiancée in a group text instead of working through problems like an adult isn't someone I want to marry anyway. And with that, she was gone. For good. But this wasn't just the end of Lydia and me. It was the beginning of a new chapter in my life, one where I could finally be free. Stick around for part 4. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Like, comment, and subscribe. After Lydia walked out of my apartment, leaving behind a trail of manipulation and broken promises, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. It was peace. A calmness that I hadn't experienced in over 5 years. The weight of the wedding, the relationship, the constant second-guessing, it was all gone. I didn't have to live my life for someone else's approval anymore. I didn't have to keep pretending everything was okay when it clearly wasn't. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. The next few days were remarkably peaceful. I had already canceled everything related to the wedding. The venue, the catering, the photographer, all of it was behind me. But I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel regret. I felt liberated. I threw myself into work, focusing on my research. It was something I had neglected for months while I was distracted by wedding planning and the drama that had been Lydia's life. That was when I made a decision that would change everything for me. I booked a trip to Seattle for a research conference. It wasn't just about the conference, it was about getting away. I needed a fresh perspective, a chance to clear my head and focus on what really mattered. When I arrived in Seattle, the change of scenery was exactly what I needed. The city was alive with energy, but there was also a calmness to it. I attended the conference and presented my research on behavioral patterns in crisis situations. The reviews were positive, and I felt like I was finally back on track. It was at that conference that I reconnected with Dr. Patricia Williams from Stanford, whom I had known during graduate school. We had kept in touch over the years, but this time, our conversation took a turn I hadn't expected. Over dinner at a waterfront restaurant in Pike Place Market, she told me that Stanford was looking for someone with my expertise for a joint research position with their behavioral economics department. "Graham, this position could change everything for you," she said. "It's a 2-year fellowship, but it could easily turn into something permanent. The salary is around $120,000, plus research funding. You'll have access to resources here that most researchers only dream about." At first, I hesitated. I wasn't sure if I was ready to make such a big move. But then I thought about everything I had just been through. I had no attachments holding me back anymore. No wedding to plan, no fiancé to consider. It was just me, and the future I could create for myself. "Send me the details," I said. "I'm interested." When I returned to Chicago, everything felt different. I had a renewed sense of purpose. I started working on new research projects, collaborating with colleagues from other universities. I even started making plans to leave for California and take the Stanford job. It was everything I had ever wanted for my career, and I realized that the end of my relationship with Lydia had opened doors I never thought were possible. But while I was busy focusing on the future, Lydia was still trying to control the narrative. I started hearing things through mutual friends. David, my friend from Northwestern, told me that Lydia was having a hard time coping with our breakup. Apparently, she was telling people at work that I had abandoned her during a difficult time. Jake Morrison, who worked with her at the marketing firm, told me that Lydia had been asking for relationship advice, painting herself as the victim. But the funny thing was, people were starting to see through her lies. Lydia tried to tell her boss that I had been harassing her after the breakup, but when her colleagues started talking about the timeline, the story didn't add up. They all knew the truth. They knew that she had disappeared without a word, and no one was buying her victim act anymore. And then, one day, I got the final confirmation that Lydia's attempt to rewrite history wasn't going to work. It was early September when I received a certified letter. I had to sign for it. At first, I thought it was just another attempt at reconciliation, another plea for me to take her back. But when I opened the letter, I saw that it wasn't an apology. It was her version of events, a long, handwritten letter on expensive stationery, 3 pages long. In it, she admitted that she had made mistakes. She acknowledged that blocking me for 6 weeks was immature and that she should have communicated better. But there was one part of the letter that struck me. Even in her apology, she couldn't resist rewriting history. She claimed that she had been overwhelmed by societal pressure to get married, that our relationship had become too serious too quickly. She said she had felt trapped and needed to rediscover herself before committing to marriage. The audacity! She had spent 6 weeks partying across Europe, sleeping with random guys, and now she was trying to paint herself as the victim. As if I had somehow pressured her into everything. I read the letter twice, then filed it away in the folder I had created. Not because I planned to respond, but because it perfectly captured the problem that had existed throughout our entire relationship. Lydia was incapable of taking genuine responsibility for her actions. Even in her apology, she was still the victim. The next few weeks went by quickly. I had already accepted the job at Stanford, and I was in the process of packing up my life in Chicago. My parents were supportive, though my mother still had concerns about me moving so far away. My father, ever the practical one, focused on the career benefits. "This is the kind of opportunity you've been working toward, son," he said. "You can't let anything hold you back." And he was right. Moving to California felt like stepping into a new life. A life that was mine and mine alone. I wasn't weighed down by anyone else's emotional baggage or expectations. I was finally free. 2 weeks before I was set to leave for California, I ran into Sarah at a coffee shop in Lincoln Park. She looked uncomfortable when she saw me, but she approached my table anyway. "Graham, hi. How are you?" she asked, hesitating before sitting down. "I'm well, Sarah," I replied, trying to keep the conversation light. "Actually, I'm moving to California next month for a new position." "That's great," she said, though there was something hesitant in her voice. "A fresh start, right?" She paused, then added quietly, "I owe you an apology. I didn't know the whole story when everything happened. Lydia told us that you two had mutually agreed to take some time apart. I had no idea she had blocked you or that the whole thing was so one-sided." I felt a small sense of relief. "It's all right," I said. "It doesn't matter now. It all worked out for the best." As I boarded my flight to San Francisco in January 2025, I reflected on everything that had happened. I thought about the lies, the betrayal, and how far I had come. Lydia had been a big part of my life for 5 years, but now she was just a memory. A painful memory, yes, but one that had led me to this moment. This time, I wasn't running away. I was moving forward. I was heading towards a future I had created for myself, one that was mine alone. The irony wasn't lost on me. Lydia's trip to Europe had been about finding herself, but what I realized was that I had found myself in the process. If you've enjoyed this story, please like this video and leave a comment letting me know your thoughts. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, make sure you hit the notification bell so you never miss another intense story like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.